Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Halloween presentation of my channel. And today I'm going to be working with Tom Connors from Midnight's Edge and Script Doctor to take my goofy idea for a sequel to the film Wes Craven's New Nightmare and see if we can make it work into something coherent. And so I'm very, very excited to have on my two guests. Script Doctor, hello, and thank you for coming on.
Hello, thanks so much for having me on your channel. It's great to be here and do things that is do this type of thing, which is a lot of fun. Just a little bit fan gushing, but a little bit industry pitching. I dig it. I like this. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm very gratified that you've elected to come on. I appreciate it. And Tom Connors from Midnight's Edge, hello, and thank you for coming on.
Good morning. How's everybody doing?
I'm doing all right. Still getting my morning voice out of the way.
Same here.
Sunday morning. Now, we'll see if this works, given that this is a technical horror stream as I play some soothing piano music in the background. Just as a level set and a brief biography, Script Doctor, who are you and what do you do professionally?
Well, I am the Script Doctor. I'm a professional screenwriter not so much from Hollywood. I work in Hollywood, but I currently live in Canada. I bounced back 2 and 4 from Canada to the U.S. Well, I did prior to the pandemic. Now I'm currently located in Canada at the moment. I have written a number of screenplays, worked on a number of television shows, mostly as a script doctor. I'd come in during an emergency issue to avoid an insurance day and rewrite a passage of dialogue or reorganize a scene at the request of either an executive producer, a showrunner, or someone involved in the show on an emergency level. And I have been doing that for a little over 17 years now. And I also have a YouTube channel where I do essays and reviews on film and television. So that's the basics that I can provide of myself.
Excellent, thank you. And Tom, who are you and what do you do?
I am the voice of my own God, and I do whatever the voices tell me to. No, I'm Tom Connors. Of course, I'm from Midnight's Edge and Midnight's Edge After Dark, and I am just a Freddy fan. Yeah, I've dabbled in a few things here and there, and I'm just here to annoy the hell out of you guys.
Excellent. And for anybody who doesn't know either of these two guys or their projects, links to all of their particulars are in the description. By all means, check them out, follow them on Twitter, subscribe to their channels, all that good stuff.
I do feel like I'm in a Charlie Brown cartoon, though.
Oh, the music? Yeah, see, I was like...
It's your nightmare, Charlie Brown.
Real quick, thank you, Okinada. This kind of looks like Greek Thunderdome. Okay. Well, if the piano music offsets the mood too much, I can always turn it off, but I thought...
No, it's all right for now, anyway. I mean...
Yeah. So, here's the idea, guys. How did this all begin? Well, let me give you the very brief, capsulated version of what happened. So about, I don't know, a week ago, 2 weeks ago now, this tweet went out from Tom Connors. And it was in regards to an interview that was being done with Heather Langenkamp, the actress who played Nancy Thompson in the original Nightmare on Elm Street. And she was asked about a Nancy and Freddy revived confrontation, and she said, I'd love to see a future in that. I've been really watching the Halloween saga. I love watching Jamie Lee Curtis get to play that part. And Tom was not too jazzed with the idea. He said, and very rightly so, Nancy is dead, unless we're talking a new Nightmare sequel. Not sure I want this. And because I am so terrible at self-generation, I work much better when I have a prompt or a challenge or brainstorming. As soon as he says this, I'm thinking to myself, how could you legitimately put Nancy and Freddy in the same room again without violating canon? And that's what started all of this. And so I dropped some plot nugget ideas in that thread. We'll go over them as we proceed. But that idea wouldn't leave my mind the last 2 weeks, and it kept percolating, and finally I said, I got to do something with this. So on a lark, I contacted Script Doctor and then Tom, and so here's the idea. Each of us has a role in this project. I play the role of the know-nothing yokel with a crazy idea for a sequel. Script Doctor is going to play the role of the professional scriptwriter who's going to help hammer this out into maybe a reasonable narrative. And Tom Connors is our lore master. He is the Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street expert. So as we proceed in hashing out plot details or character relationships or things like that, he will check us on our accuracy and or suggest solutions to problems we might encounter. But regardless of our individual roles, the idea here is to have a nice collaborative project where we come up with a sequel specifically to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. So, Script Doctor, I've never done anything like this before. What do you need from me? What's the first step in the process here? And also, for those of you that don't know, if you don't know the background behind Wes Craven's New Nightmare, it would take a long time to explain. I'm sure we'll get into it as we go, but I didn't want to do like a whole movie review right here. Anyway, that's where my introduction ends. How shall we begin?
Well, usually in a pitch on the professional side of things, you have a log line, usually a sentence or two outlining the premise and the problem that is faced by the main characters. Mm-hmm. And the movie itself is going to be the journey of that solution. That happens after the log line, so that's part of the pitch. Is you do your setup, you do your journey. Where are these characters when we see them? What are the problems they're facing? What are they going through? And how is it resolved? Like in the pitch, you actually spoil your movie.
Yes.
You're not trying to sell an executive on the mystery of things. Much like to a degree, you're not trying to sell the customer so much on a mystery of things. You want to get as close to it as possible without actually ruining it on the customer side of things. But to the exec, you just spoil away. They don't have time for it. They want to know that you have an outcome. You're selling the mystery and the anticipation to the general audience. So that's where I would strongly suggest starting. If you have a log line or you have a basic idea of the overall premise, we start with that, and then we start developing. All right, who are the characters that play? What is it they want? What are they doing? And we'll go from there.
Okay, so I got an overall theme to the movie, and I've got the actual initiating events. So the overall theme, if this makes any sense, is one's attachment to the portrayal that they are known for. So Robert Englund is always going to be Freddy Krueger and Doug Bradley is always going to be Pinhead, that kind of thing, but also a sense of ownership or stewardship over that role, that kind of mentality, right?
Okay.
So the idea is there's an announcement that there's going to be a new Nightmare on Elm Street reboot, but this time, in order to, appease modern audiences, the antagonist will be played by a female. And this information is so what I imagine is we start basically where with Tom's tweet, where Heather Langenkamp, Robert Englund, and Jackie Earle Haley are all at a convention being interviewed about the franchise, and they're asked about it'd be great to see those characters again, and then one of the reporter drops, yeah, the studio's planning on doing this. And so what happens is over the course of the movie, the two versions of Freddy, Jackie Earle Haley's version, Robert Englund's version, sort of start manifesting into reality. And it seems like it's a consequence of the fan base, this almost cult-like fan base going nuts on the internet, debating not only the merits of the original Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, but also a renaissance of the Jackie Earle Haley portrayal in light of this challenge to the status quo. And so these two Freddys start almost having a competition for dominance in a way, in sort of like what evil they're doing. And caught in the middle again, of course, is Heather Langenkamp. And so all of this, and so shenanigans take place, but the culmination of this is that at the very end, Heather has to manifest Nancy, the character of Nancy, to fend off these two Freddys, because she has to bring her portrayal as well into the real world somehow. But here's the twist. It was all a ruse, because from New Nightmare we find out that the entity that is Freddy in that thing is just a sort of a cumulative evil that is looking for a way out into the real world. And Wes Craven set the rule in there that Nancy, or Heather, was the final gatekeeper to that person coming out, right? Well, the sort of shadows of these two Freddies were all meant to bait Heather Langenkamp into willfully summoning an aspect of that story, her character, into the real world, and thus letting the evil out. So really, Heather Langenkamp is the villain of the piece without even knowing it, because her ego got the better of her. And consequently, you go back to the beginning of the movie, yes, the antagonist of the next Nightmare on Elm Street movie is a female. There's my pitch.
So Nancy is her own worst enemy as a result of the ego of the character. Okay.
Well, So the idea being that if a female, sort of like if a female becomes the star of the next franchise, then Nancy/Heather is no longer the primary female figure of
I see
the
where
story.
he's going.
Yeah, okay. I'll stop now.
No, like, here's my issue with it, and this is just a personal thing from fans' point of view.
Mm-hmm.
We hate the remake. Like,
okay.
hate it with a passion. Like, yeah, we respect Jackie Earle Haley, but... And I see where you're coming from, and I kind of like that, because I was going to suggest maybe you should just... I like the whole idea that Hollywood's doing a remake, and the essence of Freddy doesn't like that. And I like the twist that it's a female Freddy this time instead of it being, you know, a guy. Maybe that's part of what's stirring him up. As far as the Jackie Earle Haley part, I think that's just complicating things a little too much, because you've only had so many people who've seen the remake. And from there, you're going to have to explain that, yeah, this is the guy that played Freddy in the remake. This is the original Freddy. Like, that's just me personally. I don't know what Script Doctor feels about that, but I feel like you're complicating the matter just a tiny bit. And I agree the end might need some cleaning up a little bit, but I like where you're going with it in a way. I like the idea that Freddy's mad that they're remaking Nightmare on Elm Street and not in his image, kind of thing, and he wants to. And I think you can have a twist with the idea that Freddy is trying to make his own movie, regardless of what Hollywood wants. You know what I mean? Like you have this idea that he is manipulating the entire thing from behind the scenes. I liked that part of it to a point, like kind of where you're getting an idea that you have they're making a new remake. It stirred Freddy up again. Nancy's starting to have dreams in the real world. You know, she doesn't have anybody to turn to because Wes is gone. Robert's still around, but you know, that's all they got is each other.
Still. Nico,
and you could
still alive.
Well, I was going to suggest you start the movie off with him getting killed.
With Robert Englund getting killed?
No, with Miko getting killed.
Her son Dylan.
Yeah, her son Dylan dying. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
With Freddy killing Dylan to stir things up again. But that's just my open interpretation of what you just said. Script. I'm curious what you thought about it.
I like the competitive aspect between the Robert Englund and Jackie Earle Haley, because you got, even though there are definitely the core fans don't like the reboot of New Nightmare. There are fans of that, but also you could play it in that the Jackie Earle Haley version is the Hollywood take of what they want to do, and the Robert Englund one is the pure, the noble one, and you have those two competing for each other. But I do like the aspect. I really do enjoy the aspect that the evil itself has taken on the form of Nancy, by way of exploiting Heather's ego and her desire to see her return to a role that she hasn't really been a part of for a very long time. And you play into the actor's ego of like, oh, Jamie Lee Curtis is coming back for Halloween, and God knows how many times. And I'm doing little pictures here. I'm doing television and all that stuff. I would really like to come back for like a modern, big budget feature of this, and really give the fans that they want, and get back into the horror scene again. There's something really, really awesome about that for a character motivation.
That was what I wanted to lean on. The idea that if the initiating motivation is that her son dies, it takes away from the idea that her, because at the end of New Nightmare, when they're in like the furnace room hellscape or whatever, along the wall, you'll see that this is carved in the 7 deadly sins. And I'm thinking that since Wes was saying that the evil in that movie was looking for Heather's weakness in order to come into the world, I thought that, this is an endless, eternal entity. It's got all the time in the world, literally. So it just waits around until it can leverage her weakness, which isn't her family, because that's always a thing, or someone that she loves or close to, but instead her own psychology. So I think killing off the kid would change the dynamic of how that works, and take away from the irony of eventually her summoning her character into the world, which actually is the moment where she actually screws up and opens the gate for the evil to come in, if that makes sense.
Well, because you have a problem then, because you have this loose end of him just hanging around doing nothing.
I was
saying
I would be thinking, why isn't Miko cast as the star for the reboot of the reboot? They have the male lead trying to Johnny Depp him or something of that nature. And the mother is expecting to be involved in that because she's the mom. But the producers of Hollywood are like, well, we want to go with someone younger, or we don't even want to bring it in. And Nancy's dead, so he's playing a different character. He's not playing your actual son. You've got that aspect to it, because now you've got her in a very difficult position. She has her own ego, but she also wants to see her son succeed because she's like a star mom, and they care a lot about their children's. You have a dichotomy there. It's a very simple one to motivate her.
But that kind of goes against Nancy's character, Heather's actual character in the first New Nightmare, because she wants to keep her family separate from that's the thing. So but
then you have him do it, and she can't do anything to help that. Like, you have the mother's like, oh yeah, my kid is acting and he's doing well, there's nothing I can stop him, but he's never done a horror, and now he's being courted for a horror for the first time.
So he's doing it in defiance. He's doing it in defiance of his mother's wishes. Is that maybe part of it?
I don't. You know what? The defiance seems like it'd be the low-hanging fruit. I think it would be more like he himself got into acting but never had any interest in horror, and completely. I mean, the actor was like 8 when he was playing that role.
Yeah.
At the time, so I would suggest that maybe he just never realized that his mom, he just never had an interest in horror really. Until much later in life, and until his agent says, hey, they want to do a horror thing, and because you're the son of a scream queen, do you want to partake? And he sees it as just a fun opportunity and a nice little nod to his mom's career, and she can be flustered by it and be like, no, you can't do a horror film, or especially you can't do one of this franchise, and you can play around with that being either the personal aspect to go back to A New Nightmare, and also the ego aspect of, well, Jamie Lee Curtis got to do Halloween again. Maybe I should be the one taking on this.
Here's the only other thing. It's like, I see where you guys are going, but you're like, it's getting kind of lost in the minutia of her real life mixing with this other idea, and her having this ego, like she would have some kind of ego. That's the thing. Heather doesn't have, that part of her doesn't really kind of come through to me. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Well, it depends on how you understand the Hollywood stigma of a woman over 40.
I get what you're saying, guys, but she's not out there being Jamie Lee Curtis. She doesn't have that career, right? And I'm not saying she wouldn't aspire to want to do it again, but.
Well, I mean, if you take some time at the beginning we're talking about the character of Heather Langenkamp as far as the universe of the movie is concerned. So if we establish something at the beginning where we see Heather having a kind of jealousy or craving for that sort of spot back in,
it could be a self-serving craving as opposed to a jealousy aspect. That's
the other person. That too. But that's why I thought having at least somewhere in the opening where she's being interviewed about it as part of the setup for where is her mindset at about it, drop some hints that maybe she's feeling left out, etc., that kind of thing, and then have the character's sort of mentality established that over the time she's felt adrift without that kind of sense of identity. And I know identity is a loaded term these days, but I think the relationship between an actor and the role they can never really escape is an interesting one to me. And I think that might be
Well, I was just going to say, I think there's an idea there, because you can almost just have it to where her son has just moved off and he's wherever doing whatever.
I was thinking he was
not
at
an
college
issue
or
either.
something. I thought he was at college.
I
with
mean,
his
he'd be
own
way
family
past
somewhere.
college probably by now, but
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
35, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's just it. He'd be off raising his own family and whatnot. Like you could, that you could maybe get away with just having a phone call earlier in the film. And maybe that's
if
part
you're
of the
gonna do a phone call, there's no point in using it ever.
Yeah, I mean, just if anything, you have it to where whatever, and that because my point was this is I think the most important thing about stirring it all up is you have the idea that Hollywood is remaking it, right? Like that's I think your key here, and I think that may be why you should just ignore the other remake altogether because then it takes away the and again, I get where script is coming from. I like the idea of the battle thing going on too, but to me, you got too many people who are not even aware of that remake. Like they just don't care. It's not even.
Well,
you'll have to sit down and explain it all to people, and that's where I'm looking at is the reason New Nightmare works is because it's simplicity, right? As complicated as it is, and you said you didn't want to get into its, the explanation of the whole film, but the simplicity is just this. Freddy is not just a movie. It's an entity that has decided that it's going to attach itself to that figure, right? And it got angry when they decided they were going to kill that figure. So I like the dichotomy of they're remaking it. So that entity is now angry because it's no longer like whatever it is, it's losing its power. A new version of that entity has come in. And that's where I was saying like bringing in a new version of Earl Haley would kind of confuse the matter. I say you come up with a brand new version of Freddy. Like that's the whole thing is they're trying to say that this is going to be the scariest version ever, and it's pissing that version of Freddy, the original entity, off.
Wait, why would there be a new entity?
There isn't one. That's the whole point.
It's the reimagining of the.
It's the reimagining that's weakening the original. Is my point.
Yeah.
Like because that's the whole thing. Is Freddy is he chose that entity, chose that form, so it's stuck in that form. Let's say because that's kind of maybe part of the lore, right? Is that it can't get out of that form now until something happens, and you guys got to figure out what that something is. And maybe the remake is the key to its breaking out of this. I don't know, but that's the whole thing is that it's kind of trapped in that entity, and that's what it got upset for in the first place was that New Line Cinema decided to kill Freddy Krueger, hence taking away all its power. And it wanted to get out of the movies and into the real world. And that was the whole point of it. Yeah.
That contradicts the twist, which is that the Nancy character ends up being the manifestation ends up being the entity. The entity is transposed into the Nancy character to be free.
And that's where I got confused too. And that's where I was like, it makes more sense if maybe the new entity is like a female Freddy Krueger like Hollywood would do. But you said, why would there be two entities then? Yeah.
Well, you're the one that's saying new entity.
Yeah.
Me and Scribe are saying it's a single entity that's able to.
Well, you already said two entities with Jackie Earle Haley. It was originally set up like it was two of them.
Okay, so the original idea with the two Freddys was this: is that those are shadows of those two actors' senses of the character that the entity is exploiting. But since Nancy is the gatekeeper, she's the only one that can really open the door. But he can exploit the subconscious or the sense of identity of those two guys in their nightmares to make those things happen. But to really come out into the world again, he's got to get Nancy to willingly summon an aspect of him in this entity. And so he's like infested himself into this whole thing. And then when she summons Nancy, the actual character of Nancy, what she's summoning is a female version of Freddy Krueger, which is,
which is still the same entity. The entity has just found a new path.
Yeah. It's pulling all the puppet strings, just like in Elm Street 3 when the Freddy puppet shows up. It's pulling all the puppet strings of everybody's subconscious to get Heather to make that choice willingly without fighting him. He doesn't want Heather to fight him. He wants her to effectively join him or be his avatar now, because instead of trying to make her an adversary, he wants to make her part of the
an unwittingly ally. Yeah, he wants to exploit her so that he can break through, because all of his previous attempts over the lifetime have failed.
Yeah. And just as an aside, just a note to maybe keep in mind, with the absence of her son, I was just thinking, speaking of identity and roles and purpose and everything, if her son is now away out of the picture with his own family somewhere, and she's feeling that sense of loss of being a mother, having that role in life, and now sort of that that need is now looking for something else to latch onto to give herself identity and purpose. Maybe that's also part of not necessarily the ego / jealousy thing, but the desire, the crave, the lust for some
new meaning.
Yeah.
Oh, that you can have fun with that.
I mean, Freddie using her in a way, like, the thing is throwing Jackie Earle Haley in there is confusing the matter. That's what my problem is as an audience member.
Well, yeah, but see, here's the thing. If you make the movie for the fans, you're not going to need to explain that. It's because I'm trying to think of this as like, okay, are we shooting for...
Well, that's what I was kind of saying, is you're taking what already was a small sect of the Nightmare on Elm Street fan base and making it even smaller, I guess what I was trying to say.
Here's also my thought. Like, what happened with the Star Wars movies? So sequels come out and they're terrible, and everybody starts reevaluating the prequels as of a better quality, whether they were or not. It's all opinion and everything. But what I would imagine is in this world where we have the sudden social media uproar over, oh, they're going to change Freddy and do this, that, and the other. Similarly, it has the knock-on effect of having a Fredissance, I don't know, of the reboot, and then people appreciate it more. And that's sort of like the fake out that it's now feeding the egos of Robert Englund and Jackie Earle Haley. And that's why the two shadows show up, except that's not. It's the entity pulling the strings from behind. So it's kind of fooling with the idea of like, where is the source of this energy coming from? Is it the cultish fan base? Or at the twist at the end, we find out it's actually the individual mentalities of the actors. Is that, and again, this is all subtext for how Hollywood works and the modern interaction between the fan base and the producers and the stars. There's a whole bunch of like, in my mind, there's a whole bunch of like, we don't have to say it out loud subtext going on about modern Hollywood taking place here.
Okay. Well, I'm curious what the audience thinks of it all, because I mean, I get where you're coming from in certain aspects. Some of it I'm kind of muddy on. And I mean, for Nancy, here's the thing. Like, to her, for me as a fan, like, she's like almost like the Luke Skywalker of this franchise in a way. Like, to me, for her to make some of those mistakes don't make sense. Like, that's where I'm kind of having a hard time with this. Like, she's not that egotistical, even as the actor or the character. And for Freddie to play on her ego just doesn't make... I have a hard time seeing it. I see where you're coming from and how you're working it out at the end. I don't know. Like, maybe there's a way you can pass over the Jackie Earle Haley thing altogether, because that's the thing is kind of confusing me. And I'm curious what everybody else thinks of that. But
let's see. Mr. Tickle Trunk says, I'll just agree with whatever Tom says to make things easy. Well,
you don't have to, Mr. Tickle Trunk.
Lexi Mads,
I didn't pay you this time.
Yeah,
See, because here's the thing is, like, if you have this idea of a remake is what is stirring up Freddy now, or he's trying to stir things up again, because he already had the remake once and it didn't work, right?
Yeah, that can't be used as a point of comedy that is woven throughout all of the Freddy films.
Like, what you can do with that maybe is just have it as a sense that since that version of Freddy wasn't much different than the other version, that the entity was behind that or whatever anyway. But like you can even just have a quick fun moment where, like, they bring up where she even says, well, what about the other remake? And he just turns really quickly into Jackie Earle Haley, and he's like, not much of a change here, or something like that. You know, just a quick joke went off kind of thing.
Or since she wasn't involved in that story, Heather specifically, that it didn't count or something.
Exactly. And that's kind of, okay, there you go. That's where I'm having a problem connecting the dots, because you're making Nancy so important when it's like in Jackie Earle Haley's story, that version of Nancy is a completely different version. And for him to have any kind of attachment to her makes no sense. And that's where I'm like, and for her to even have any give a shit in that arena, that's where, if you're trying to attach those two franchises, that's where I'm having a problem. To if there's just a way we can bypass that remake, and that this is supposed to be the new Ultimate remake or something like that, and that's what's stirring it all up. I don't know.
Like they're Highlander 2ing the Jackie.
Yeah, and that's where I said, like, you know, especially if Freddy finds out that he's being gender swapped, or they're completely changing his character to where it's not the same, right? That's what I was saying, is like, there's something that's upsetting the entity to where it's like, you're changing the character, that's taking away my power. You know what I mean? Like, the fact that Freddy still lives on and whatever, like, maybe you can even play with that, right? Like, in the beginning of the film, that it's like, even though Freddy was gone and been remade, he's never gone away. He's still popped up in video games and everywhere else, and it's still present, but it's just not as strong as it was before. Something to that effect, maybe. I don't know, because like I'm trying to figure out where you can make this click. Because with otherwise, to me, I'm not seeing the hook as much as you guys are. Maybe, I guess, as a Freddy fan, I'm just like, yeah, a lot of this just sounds more like you're working with what you got, but there's nothing here that really is hooking me in. Is what I'm trying to say. Like, other than you got Heather Langenkamp, great. You got Robert Englund, great. What do you got else? Like, that's, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I like it. I just, the Jackie Earle Haley thing is really muddying the thing for me.
Okay.
Just because it was a one and done.
Yeah, and it's nothing personal. I actually like Jackie in the yeah, but that's just it. It's one and done. It didn't have any resonance like the other films did, and that's what makes New Nightmare work. Is you don't have to have seen all the sequels, as long as you've seen that first one, right? Mm-hmm. That's all that really fucking matters. I mean, maybe the third one, but as long as you've seen that first one, that's the main thing. And that's kind of the way you got to run this, is as long as you've seen the first one, as long as you've seen New Nightmare, that's kind of where it has to kind of fall in that line to where yeah, you can bring up the other sequels and you can mention the remake somehow and make it play, but like having the two entity thing, or have two different Freddys thing, to me just gets confusing the matter. And she has no attachment. And that's what I was trying to say, is like, with the her and Jackie Earle Haley thing, I just can't see. Like, you can give him a cameo or some way of, you know, giving it a nod somehow. But like,
one final pitch on the Jackie Earle Haley part. If for no other reason than to have a red herring as to what the source of this problem is.
Maybe.
Because if you have the two characters, you know, or versions of it, iterations coming out against each other, either for dominance one to the other, or just dominance of the idea of what Freddy is supposed to be, as opposed to whatever is being suggested by the studio, that would effectively overwrite. Because you know, like same theme we have with what Disney's done with Star Wars and so on, is they introduce all these characters to essentially negate or void the past, and now our future is the new future, and the past is irrelevant now. That kind of
you could do a reverse on that, actually, and actually put Nancy in that position to where she is helping Freddy in the end. And that is like the whole mystery that kicking things off is everybody involved with the remake starts showing up dead. And it's because Freddy's going through and killing everybody who's trying to remake the movie, because it's not only taking away his power, it's taking away Nancy's power to let him into the real world, because they're replacing Nancy as well. Like what you were saying. Like, maybe there's a way you can do that, is like that brings her character into it, makes it a little bit more important. Like they're introducing a new character that's supposed to be the new Nancy or something, and like that's does that make sense? Or
the whole story is Freddy trying to save Nancy's significance in the lore so that he still has an out at some point.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. And that's
he's not trying to kill Nancy this time. He's trying to save Nancy from
it's not really even saving her. It's just so much at the end that he can have it to where, like you said, he tricks her into being the one to let her out, let him out. I mean.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
But that's just another option. Yeah. Sorry. I know I'm messing this up for you guys. I'll shut up.
No, Dom. This is perfect. This is exactly what. Okay. Speaking of which,
well, if you want to have some fun with the Jackie Earle Haley part and the competition, make the original Freddy Krueger constantly ahead, and then the Jackie Earle Haley part gets absorbed into Freddy, and then he's gone. And that's one stepping stone for the Freddy of the old to be the pinnacle.
Oh yeah.
Because basically the fans are liking the classic Freddy kills and the new stuff, and then you could actually just have Jackie Earle Haley be like, what am I doing here? Why?
Yeah,
you're bringing me back just because I'm young? And it's like,
Jackie Earle Haley is the Ross Perot of the whole equation, sort of stealing power away from George Bush, and he has to eliminate Ross Perot to get the full meal. Okay, well, we've thrown a whole bunch of stuff out there.
I just throw stuff in there. I don't want to take away anything. I'm sorry.
No, dude, this is perfect. This is exactly what I wanted. This is like three guys trying to hash out this thing. This is like sitting around trying to figure out what would happen in a battle between the Hulk and Batman or something. I love it. Okay, well, Script Doctor, we have a whole bunch of concepts on the table. I don't know how accurate this is to an actual pitch in Hollywood and so on, but what do we start doing to start refining?
Producers development meeting.
Yeah, more or less. But how do we start, if we can, start refining this a bit?
The only other thing I could throw out there is this, is that instead of it being a remake, going off of the Halloween bit, is that Hollywood wants to make a movie with Heather and Robert, and they're creating, it's going to be a passing of the torch film, and that's what the entity doesn't like, maybe something to that effect.
Or they're just cameos in their own film or something.
Exactly. Like I'm saying, like, yeah, they're like a Force Awakens kind of situation where it's introducing a new boulder killer and a new hero. And yeah, that's the thing. Well, like maybe something along those lines.
It's like they're gonna cast Robert Englund as like the attorney, and Heather Langenkamp is just like the librarian. They're not even playing their own characters anymore. They're just cameos, like in the Ghostbusters 2016.
And that's what it's not so much. What I was saying is it actually is that, right? Because that's building up the whole idea is that, they're using Nancy as a tool, like they did Jamie Lee Curtis, like, come see the movie because she's back. And that's kind of the trick, is it's just a passing of the torch onto these newer kids in the end, and a new bad guy. And that's what's got everybody upset as far as like Freddy. And then that he's using that as kind of like I said, he started killing all the new cast or something like that. Because you still got to have kills and all that kind of stuff too.
Oh yeah. So you're thinking that the movie within the movie isn't a total reboot with a brand new cast, but a sequel to the existing franchise. So it'd be a sequel to Freddy's Dead, basically.
Kind of, or Freddy versus Jason, but it's a stupid Lego sequel where they're so stupid, and that's what everybody keeps saying is like, but Nancy's dead. It's like nobody cares, and that's the whole thing, is that maybe that's the key, is that it's erasing all the other sequels through that Lego sequel, right? Kind of how H2O and then vicariously 2018 did eventually. Like maybe that's part of what's stirring him up.
We're going to ignore all the sequels. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really what's bothering the entity.
Okay, so let's play around with that premise. Let's say hypothetically, Heather is brought back. She's really excited to be returning to this world. She likes the hook of how she's still alive, but she finds out the director is Rob Zombie, or a Rob Zombie type.
Perfect.
And she's a little disappointed by that.
That's a good start.
And maybe that could be the in for the entity to start causing havoc on this production, which would have to logically scare the crap out of Heather, and bring back new nightmare flashbacks.
She's remembering the events of the previous film and everything, but we're also because if you look at the events of the previous film, sort of in a 30,000 foot, spent any time explaining what happened. They never gave any other explanation. Oops. We're getting some I'm getting some notice from StreamYard that it's having some connection issues. So guys in the chat,
you dipped out a little.
Yeah, we had this happen yesterday. If you guys in the chat, if we suddenly drop out of audio, because that happened to me yesterday on a stream, put a bunch of big red X's in the chat and we'll wait until we're back on, because it seems to be intermittent. But that's just
you could always have Jackie in the dream within a dream within the dream in the beginning. Because every one of these always starts within a dream,
Well, the other part you have to consider is that Robert Englund is of age. He's an older guy. He can't do as much. You can play with the fact that they're like courting Jackie Earle Haley to reprise the role, but it's still a different thing. And then we're also looking at other people to play the role, and that you can just have a fun casting session scene. And they bring in Heather for the chemistry aspect of things, even though she's probably not going to be playing the Nancy, and that's the duck blinds. Like, they just want to see how they respond to the original Nancy, and then they're going to bring in their new Nancy, and she's just going to be the cameo. That's an aspect that Hollywood, that people can understand within Hollywood as well.
Well, what if the new Nancy? What if the new Nancy is a boy as opposed to the female?
I was going to suggest it be a gay guy, but yeah.
No, you can totally do that if you really want to play into
kind of playing into part 2 as well.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, honestly, like I kind of, as a fan, I kind of dig the idea more that they're trying to do a Halloween 2018 with Heather Langenkamp, That's just me
this
personally.
this is Hollywood competition. It's like, well, our franchise needs a revitalization too.
Yes.
So what are we going to do? Yeah, okay. And we have the backroom scene with the directors and the producers and things. Okay. I don't know what the next step is. I'm I'm so lost now.
I am sorry. I
Just
threw a
refining
monkey
the plot. It's just refining now the plot. So
Yeah.
we have the Hollywood take, which is that the studio that owns the rights to Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is quite impressed with what Universal has done with Halloween, and they want to try and do that. They want to copy that formula, and you could also play into the fact that they're bringing back the mom from The Exorcist for their series. Like, there's a lot of industry stuff on horror that's going around that you can play around with on this, and I think, yeah, that's the studio's mentalities. They want to reboot the franchise. They want to make it for modern audiences.
Yes.
Yeah, very much in the vein of like Force Awakens and stuff. You can even call it The Nightmare Awakens or something.
I was thinking, like, yeah, The Nightmare Awakens. And completely devoid of the fact that that's a contradiction.
That's kind of the point. That's what I do script.
Yeah. And no, because that's perfect Hollywood. Like, you know, the 20-somethings out of college just shooting the breeze on these stupid ideas.
It's a stoner title and it works. Exactly.
And then you have the one guy who's the kid who's that diehard fan. He's like, we got to bring Heather back. And it's like, but she's dead. It's like, we'll figure it out. That's what we hire writers for. You know, you have that.
Well, and maybe there's a bit there to the whole idea is like, you know, because like, yeah, the key of it is the fans really want Robert back, but like you said, he's reluctant or something like that because he's old. You know, and all that kind of business.
They start talking about like Robert. No, you won't actually have to do. We got motion capture, and we can face replace, and we can AI your voice. I mean, we just need you there to be sort of like part of the energy behind it. Yeah. Then
the best part is later on, you can have when Freddy kills somebody, you can have him say, "I don't need CGI for this," you know, or something. Yeah. You know, and he just totally does something really cool to kill the guy. Yeah. See, that's the thing is I'm kind of thinking of it from a fan perspective of you got to get me hooked into this movie somehow. What's the key twist, right? Because, I mean, even with New Nightmare, the key twist was we're getting Heather back. We're getting a new version of Freddy that's scarier. Wes Craven's directing, and it's a twist on the idea of, you know, the movies are still a movie, but this is real, right? And they really played with that a lot, even to the point where, like I brought up, the novel does its own version of it in a way. And the author disappears 2/3 of the way through the book, and the editor has to finish it, like implying that Freddy got the author. Like, yeah, it's this really like they did a really great job across all media of selling that idea. Sadly, it didn't resonate, and that's the thing is, like at first I didn't know you were going directly off of New Nightmare because there is other avenues you can go because they did Freddy versus Jason after New Nightmare, so technically that kind of reset it back into that mold because New Nightmare technically flopped. As much as I love it and as much as many people like it, it's not one of those movies that most people have seen or resonates with the fans like the other ones do. So I didn't know if you were going to just be doing like, you know, we're doing this, and because otherwise I'm not sure how you could bring Nancy back. There's real no way to do it unless she's like a good dream demon or whatever you want, or dream angel or whatever you want to call it.
That's what I was thinking. I was trying to think like within the rules of New Nightmare, like with the original tweet, what would be a legitimate in canon way to have the character of Nancy and the character of Freddy?
That's pretty much it.
Yeah, that really is it as far as I can tell. Unless you just hand wave over Elm Street 3 and do a whole Halloween 2018 and just say, oh, only the first movie happened and etc.
And that kind of could be like, and that's what I was saying is that could be you're into this as far as them making a Lego sequel, and that's what's stirring Freddy up again is because he knows he's going to be replaced or something like that.
You're canceling 5 of my sequels.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And maybe it's even like Freddy's daughter or something. You can even bring back Lisa Zane and slap her in some makeup and shit.
Oh yeah. Well, I was trying to think of. I mean,
that doesn't avoid the sequels. But yeah. But see, that's what the fans like too. Is they like the idea that these other characters could show up, right? And that's what.
And that's why I don't think you can completely avoid if you have. Again, this is pie in the sky hypothetical. I don't think you can completely avoid having some mention or appearance of Jackie Earle Haley in some way, like somehow.
Yeah.
Showing up, or if you. The thing is, though, I would hate for it to turn into just an Easter egg hunt as a movie. You got to have.
Oh, absolutely. No, you can't have that. No, because that's the other problem you have is New Nightmare only is fun for those who know who all these players are. Right.
Yeah.
And nobody knows who Robert Shea and all these other people are in the movie, really. I mean, I do. Script does. You might. Yep. But, you know, like, to them, he's just an actor playing a part. They didn't know it was a real guy. You know,
they couldn't tell with the terrible acting of Robert Shea.
Well, he just acts like Robert Shea.
It's just Robert Shea. Yeah. All right. So the
kill Robert Shea in this.
I don't know if he'd want anything to do with it, to be honest with you.
I kind of like the fact that none of the major players died. Like Wes Craven didn't die. John Saxon didn't die. And so on and so on. Like all the main actors, they eventually lived or just sort of left the scene. Like Robert Englund at a certain point in New Nightmare just didn't show up anymore. They were just off and running. So you didn't actually kill off anybody who was vital to the reality of the situation.
Well, and that was to set up the red herring because they don't play it up so much in the movie as they do in the book. But in the book, it's really implied that Robert's doing this in the background.
Yeah, that's what I thought especially with the phone.
Yeah, there's a few things in there that are kind of left, not so much on the cutting room floor, but just they weren't explored nearly as much in the movie. It seems like, because this is probably based on an earlier version of the script, but yeah.
Okay, so our main antagonist is the Entity. The Entity is seeing that his representation is about to get overwritten by Hollywood again, and the story that has kept him alive is intended to be effectively nullified and set into the past. Because we got to go into the future. We're going to have a brand new antagonist, maybe not even a Kruger, but just a female antagonist of some kind who's going to take the reins and move forward. And this gets the Entity all freaked out. So then in order to oppose this...
Yeah, it would wipe away around 40 years of work.
You could have...
starts him back at the...
You could have Jackie work away into this. Is it that the other Freddy is using him as kind of an avatar?
Well, that was the other thing that was one of the things I mentioned in my original thread.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Now is where you could do that, is because like that's the whole thing, is they're trying to recast him, but like he was already there as kind of his puppet to begin with.
Yeah,
right.
One of the ideas I had is that, at least in the two Freddy's version, is that Robert Englund and Jackie Earle Haley become either willingly or unwillingly disciples / avatars for their individual iterations of the character that have now been manifested in the real world. Like in New Nightmare, Robert Englund, the character, had a very sort of separate role from the whole thing. He was a red herring, but he wasn't Freddy Krueger. In this one, the idea would be that they have a more active connection to their versions of the character. And again, going back to that whole sense of ownership, curation over a particular character between the actors and
see, that's maybe how you can bring him in, is that the studio is reluctant to use Robert, and they're just like, well, we can just use Jackie again. Nobody knows the difference.
Okay, and so welcome to 40 minutes ago, Tom.
Yeah, I know. But then there wasn't a reason for Jackie to be there.
Yes, there was. The reasons have not changed.
No, they were just making a remake then. They weren't doing a Legacy sequel so much then.
Well, that should be a really key decision. Is this a reboot where it's like we're completely re-envisioning the scenario and we're having a female antagonist and not, or is it a continuation of the original thing? That is a primary point. Yeah, is it a soft reboot or is it a full-on?
And that's where I was saying is that's where you get Heather involved, in that they want to bring her back, but then she's slowly learning that it's not what she thought it was. Like, she thought it was going to be like I get where you're coming from there. That's where you can kind of play with her ego a little bit more, is where she thought she was going to be the Jamie Lee Curtis in this situation, and she finds out, oh, my character's just going to get killed off or whatever, unceremoniously.
At the very end, standing on a cliff, waiting for the
like I said,
and she's like literally standing going, why are we deleting all the sequels, and why am I even being brought back just so I can be killed right away, kind of thing. Like, that's
what I was thinking. Like, again, to try to set up the mentality at the beginning with an interview, like with the tweet you had.
And that's another thing too, is you can use it as like the fans are pissed, right? And Freddy's using that anger.
Maybe they court Heather to be an executive producer on the film as a sign of like legitimacy or something, instead of actual role. Or she finds that out like at the last second, like, oh, I'm not going to actually be in the thing. You just want to have my name attached to it as consultant or something.
her agent and manager don't tell her the finer details. They said they want you to be a part of this.
Right. Yeah, we want
thing.
you to be a part of this.
And they're going to make you an executive producer, and that's completely accurate. But she's inferring that, I'm coming back, and she's like, but Nancy's dead, and they're like, don't worry about that.
Okay. So this is a key point. Is this a soft reboot or is this a reimagining? I think as soon as we answer that question, other things start falling into place as far as the dynamic.
Well, I mean, the one that like for Hollywood wise, it would basically be a Force Awakens style take on it. So it's a soft reboot, but it echoes the original. But like the awareness of the entity is that this other franchise that they're copying the formula for mine is only going to ruin me. It's not going to save me.
Exactly. Because that's the whole motivation of the first film, is that he's mad that they killed his character off and they're not making any more movies. In this case, they're making more movies, but they're killing his character off. Right. Like that'll be the thing that kicks it in the nuts kind of thing, to where like that's the catch, right? Like that's where I see, and maybe you could work Jackie Earle Haley in that way, or you don't even have to. Like that's the thing, is it kind of, if you want to, great. Like if you're going to do that, he can be like I said, he like the entity has tapped him or whatever. Like that part works, I guess. But then you're just going to have to find a way to work that in without it, because he can't really do too much in the real world, because otherwise then why wouldn't Freddy just do that all the time?
Okay, so it's announced there's going to be a soft reboot, Force Awakens type thing. Heather is approached, but she, of course, remembers from the previous film what that does. But when she gets scared at first, but then the guy like, no, what we're imagining and doing is, Robert is too old to play the part anymore. The Jackie Earle Haley thing didn't work. So what we're going to do is we're going to find a way to pass the villainous torch off to a female, brand new character who sort of takes over the role and then moves forward. And then maybe Heather thinks that actually is good, because she knows the mechanisms of the previous film, where if you erase his ability to enter the world into people's minds again, she's all for the replacement of Freddy Krueger as a female character. And that's what starts the ball rolling.
Actually, you can kick your movie off with that. It's just like a scene in a boardroom where the guy says the remake didn't work, right? Everybody wants Robert, everybody wants Heather. How do we do this? The kind of thing. Like Halloween, the reason it worked is because because you had Jamie Lee Curtis back. So what do we do? That's where you introduce Heather into the equation, and yeah.
Okay.
No, that works for me. I think as far as the main like through line, I mean, personally as a fan.
Reconcile. Robert Englund's too old. We can't really use him. What's the next option? It's like, well, what if we bring back Heather? It's like,
okay, so then once this is announced, what is the, because I'd still like to have, if we can, the twist at the end that this was effectively a setup to get Heather to help Freddy, or vice versa. I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, the entity has manipulated Hollywood to
what happens to then start, because we have to have a Freddy show up. Either maybe it's not even a defined, maybe it's visually speaking, maybe it's in shadow and we don't really know what it looks like, except we know that it's Freddy. But what happens thereafter? Who's he first kill, or how does he first manifest to start and roping Heather back into things?
That's a great question, because
you already have Heather being brought in with the fact that they're going to do a Legacy sequel, right? And maybe that's like the whole thing is Freddy kicked off. He wants to get another sequel made, but his goal is not to have himself killed, right? So that's or replaced. Yeah. So like she can be brought in just through the Hollywood aspect, and that's where things start happening to her again. Like you can give her, she's going to obviously have like an assistant and maybe an agent and stuff like that. So like there's things you can play with there, to where there's things around her and people around her that things are happening to, and she's noticing, but nobody else is noticing perhaps. Or,
well, I think anyone dying on set, people are going to notice.
No, I mean, not on set, but okay. Like, let's say that the first person, no, anyway, you guys keep going. I'm going to shut up for a while.
Well, I mean, you could have an executive producer gets killed while driving his car on the
well, I was going to suggest the guy who's writing the remake gets killed, but yeah.
I think he would be probably one of the last ones because he's helped facilitating the manipulation to.
Well, I was going to say he's like writing a real remake originally, and then he gets killed. So then that brings in a new writer who's like, no, we can't do a remake. That didn't work last time.
Yeah, well, the one part I see, the one thing in my mind's eye, I'd want as much as possible. I understand that Freddy in the franchise is always turned into much more of a comedian over time. But I always thought of the new Nightmare franchise as its sub-franchise is much darker. At the same time, though, I can't help but think of the comedy of if not the first person to die is the activist in the boardroom who said, "What about a female taking over?"
Yes,
and then something something poetically terrible happens to them with Freddy showing up and taking.
Lizzo's really hot right now. Let's use her.
or since the movies kind of dictate what the entity can and cannot do. Maybe that's the whole thing, is that the twist in the movie, since the killer is going to be a woman, they actually have, it's more like Freddy does want a new form. And maybe that's like, because like you said, you have Freddy in the shadows. It's like he hasn't gotten his new form yet. Maybe there's something to that or something. And it's just making him even more dangerous.
And he wants to choose his form as opposed to the studio choosing it for him.
That could be
because that goes into Nancy, where he's already targeted her. He's like, I'm taking Heather. I'm making her my new form.
Yeah.
And so they kill the first executive. Says, let's make it a woman. And he's like, you don't get to pick which woman I'm gonna be inhabiting.
I just had a different. So I don't know how much more complicated this would be, but so the whole thing about Freddy is that he goes into your dreams and he terrorizes you in your dreams for, power and to murder you in your sleep and all that kind of thing. Is there some way to play with Freddy entering someone's subconscious and changing their minds in such a way that they
potentially
become so
you want to do like Freddy's learned the power of
Inception.
yeah.
Sort of like, yeah, he's the dream killer, it's like, oh, I want to have a female Freddy Krueger. Yeah, well, I'm going to kill that idea in your head, and then you sort of like come around to my way of thinking. No, that might be too complicated. I don't know about that.
It might get a little too complicated. That's what I was saying. Okay. The joke was you have in the beginning is whoever decides to do whatever Freddy doesn't want is the first one to get killed. Like that's like the whole motivation is you could have him manipulating it through that way.
Yeah. So like in the board meeting, they're all discussing what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And then as each person who's sort of on board with the idea of a reboot and having Freddy come back, you flash to the fires lighting up in the boiler room. Just a quick flash, right? Like, oh, he's being awakened. And then as soon as somebody says, but what about, but Robert's too old. And so maybe we should think about like changing things up by having a female, and then like the boiler room explodes or something, or like you see like growls coming out of it, and then you jump to the person on the freeway driving around, and then Freddy.
Well, you could also play with the fact that if they make if they find some convoluted way of making Nancy Freddy in the new Legacy sequel in some roundabout way, like that could also be his way of trying to manipulate her into becoming the new entity herself, right?
Well,
like
that's it.
He's taking her over because she's more powerful than Freddy ever was.
Well, that's the thing. I still, if possible, want the twist to be at the end that Nancy becomes the villain, but we don't know that. We don't know that's even part of it.
Right, and that's where, you can lead to that. I see where you're going with that, and that's where I'm saying is this can lead you down that path, I think, a little bit easier. I could be wrong, but that's just me.
Well, I mean, just the ending alone of Heather versus Nancy would be an interesting visual to have. Because obviously Heather's not going to turn into the evil Nancy. There's going to be it's going to be like a de-aged version of Heather that is Nancy.
Well, the irony is that if you make a joke about scanning Robert Englund for the sake of something in the movie or whatever, that the actual movie we're watching is going to have to use that same technology to make Nancy appear as like a teenager again.
Right.
I keep thinking about because part of what inspired this idea was at the end of Candyman, where the lady becomes Bloody Mary. She takes over the role of the horror figure and everything else, and sort of inherits the title, but you have sort of a clean evolution for that character to get to that point. And so that's what I sort of had in mind with the getting to the end here, where like Nancy Thompson becomes the new villain, like literally does take the place of Freddy, but with his blessing almost, kind of thing.
I mean, I see that, but you got to almost trick her into that. That's the thing.
I know, and like I said,
that's the story.
That's the story. Yeah, that's the whole evolution is that you take.
Well, no, I know, but like, and I see where you're going with that, and that's where I said you could kind of get it there. If that's their that's their whole point, is they want to replace Freddy with Nancy or something like that in the franchise.
Well, no, the studio doesn't want to. The entity wants to. That's
right. Yeah, see, the studio wants a female. They just want a female. We don't even have a point, as far as I'm concerned. We don't even cast for that part in the course of this story. They leave it up. The idea is just a female antagonist. It's implied it's going to be like Fernanda Kruger or something, but it's not that. It's just yeah.
Okay, so what happens then when? Okay, I guess that's the bigger thing is, like, if Freddy can become Nancy, then he becomes the gatekeeper, right? Like, that's kind of the whole point.
Well, no, Heather's the gatekeeper. Heather's the gatekeeper, not Nancy. Yeah, Heather has to open up the door. So here, so we have the board meeting. The wrench is thrown in of, it's going to be let's do a female. The entity gets all ticked off. The first executive dies mysteriously, car accident, something ironic, something poetic to the character that, we established, whatever. She chokes on her Starbucks or something. And so Heather, from her experience in the first movie is like, I think we're playing with fire again, guys. And so who does she go to with her suspicions about what happened? Because she's been through this before. Who's left?
Robert,
and it's like he's like, but chased your husband, he died in a car accident. It was all, because as far as the reality,
it drove your son away. You could say that or something that way. You get
him out exactly. Of the way. Yeah, it's like, your kid just survived all that therapy and everything else. Do you really want to go back? I mean, I know you can't really avoid it, but hey, this role they're offering you, this will be a way to tie it up and finally have your swan song and everything else. So, Robert should be encouraging of her in a way, but also like discouraging of her of the fantasy of it. I don't know how you
Robert should be, because he's like, listen, my last hurrah, this character was Freddy versus Jason, and I thought it was a good idea at the time, but if I got
right, yeah, there you go, yeah. It's like, I really want this. You see what's happening with Halloween, right? You see what they're doing over at Universal. I mean, this I'm not getting younger. I've got Stranger Things and I got this, man.
There's various angles that you can play into it on the talent side of things.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something that we could work with? And again, not to throw another monkey wrench, but let's because now you got me thinking here with Robert. He's going to be encouraging of Nancy, of course.
Sure.
But he's either going to be like, yeah, I'm fine, I don't want to do this, or they don't even need me anymore. They're just doing it all with a stand-in and computers, and I come in 6 months from now and do the voice. So she's like all upset that they're not working together again or something like that. And that's the kind of the whole thing, is that's also part of what's stirring Freddy up, is they're doing it artificially or something like that. And it's just, however they're doing it, he doesn't like it. And he wants to do it in his own image.
Stunt guy with Robert Englund's voice masked over him.
And he's not happy with this whole thing, and he's trying to reshape it in his image, kind of thing.
Well, and again, that comes back to the whole ownership of a character and sense of like, I played this character the entire time. It's my character. I should have some kind of say.
Well, I guess that's where you have to ask, because I guess we haven't even really figured out what the overall theme or goal is with what you're trying to say with the movie.
And attachment to roles.
Right.
Yeah. It's actually it's.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is, what is your ultimate goal of what you're trying to say with this? Because that's going to be the big question to the fans, because again, this is going down a similar path the Scream remake or Scream Legacy sequel Bootquel did.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of problems with that.
Well, here's the question. I guess this came up because, ironically enough, with the recent Halloween sequel, because spoiler alert, guys, if you haven't seen the new Halloween sequel, spoiler alert, sorry, but it's relevant to this. What it seemed like they were doing before somebody, I think, mucked with the story, was that, can the evil that is represented by the character be passed on and still live beyond that one representation of that character? Can Michael Myers just be the shape and no longer Michael Myers? So the question here is, can the evil and fear that Freddy represents, can that be passed along to a different form but still retain the same connection / legacy to what came before? Because that really is the big question about why you do these sequels and everything else, and can you have it be a continuous thing where you have a Nancy who's the villain, or the Heather who's the villain, whichever it is, however you work it out, but then that torch can be more easily passed because the idea of evil is stronger than the one individual at a time, embodying it.
I mean, I guess then what is your goal to answer to that? Because to me, as a fan of Freddy, Nightmare on Elm Street is Freddy. Freddy is Nightmare on Elm Street. You try to change that, and that's going to fuck with things. And I think that's why people are responding to Halloween Ends the way they are too, is because to them, Michael Myers is Halloween, right? Like it's
right.
So like that's what I think the ultimate. It kind of goes along with what is Star Wars. Well, Star Wars is Luke Skywalker, whether you want to admit it or not. Like, it really is. He is the story. It's you have your Superman is Superman, Jaws is Jaws. Like you can't. You can't come in and make Jaws an octopus, right? Like that's kind of the point I'm getting to. Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's in my mind, that's the challenge that sort of came about from your tweet, is like, how would you, if there could be a way, to carry the franchise forward without having to have, could you, I mean, Freddy Krueger was established as an amazing character within one film, and everybody attached to it, and everybody got on board and carried him through an entire, 7 entry franchise. Is there a way? The challenge is, can you make a continuation from the current story where you can have new characters take over, not disregard what happened, but make it a part of a continuation where you're not necessarily attached to one thing. Maybe there isn't an answer to that. Maybe nobody would accept it, but that's sort of like in my mind. That's sort of like the narrative intellectual challenge.
I mean, I think that's where you kind of have this issue of, and that's the ultimate question, right? Because in some cases, I think the answer is yes, but in certain cases, I think the answer is no, especially when evil attaches itself to something like it does with Freddy. Because let's look at it as in reality, like in real reality. When Freddy came along, when Nightmare on Elm Street came along, I was alive then, and it was like instantly Freddy Krueger was like Santa Claus. Like when she says that, New Nightmare, that is true. Like everybody knew who he was. It was like you didn't even have to see the movie. It was like it was always there. It didn't even come out till I was like 4 or 5 years old, and it still felt like Freddy Krueger was a part of your life just as much as Frankenstein or Dracula. He was just always there. He was always one of those things that just felt like it fit naturally. And that's why New Nightmare works, is because this idea that Freddy is just this ongoing thing that chooses, an avatar every so many hundreds of years that, lives along, maybe that's kind of what it is. It's like, well, for years it chose to be Dracula. Well, Dracula fell off and became Count Chocula. So now Freddy chose to be Freddy, or the entity did, and maybe that's also your thing, is that Freddy has become so, and they kind of played with that New Nightmare more so, right? Like that was Freddy's problem, is that he'd become nerfed, right? And that's kind of another thing you got to play with here, is how nerfed is Freddy, and can Freddy be scary for a new generation? And I think the answer is yes. But it's like, well, can anybody else ever play Freddy again besides Robert Englund, right? Well, New Nightmare kind of already answered that when Nancy says, yeah, it's Robert, but it's not Robert. It's darker, So like, and that's the thing, is the beauty of that makeup and how it's done is you don't have to worry about Robert looking so old, because it's all so much more different than the other makeup he had before. So
yeah, but Robert's also 75 as the day we're recording this, and the question being is, like, if you want Freddy to continue, you either have to recast him, which apparently people are objecting to, or you change him over to the entity to fit within the lore of Freddy, which is that, if he's Dracula for 100 years and he's Freddy for another 100 years, he's going to be something new. And that plays into the idea that the irony of it is that the innocent victim of the first Freddy film becomes the new entity, the new avatar of the entity later on. So now the person that you're rooting for in the first Freddy, even though you're probably actually rooting for Freddy more so than not, is now the very avatar of evil that is going to continue on for the next generation. So, you're trying to reconcile the rules, which the rules basically say, hypothetically speaking, if Dracula or Frankenstein, the Wolfman, any type of nightmare creature existed before until they became until the society became desensitized to them.
Yeah.
That's when it takes on another form. And what more of an ironic form than to have an innocent girl in her nightgown end up becoming this terror that goes after you. And the other part too is the way that Scribe has framed it, as the actor inadvertently, through deception of how evil this is, releases her. The actor still remains relatively pure, because we're not discrediting the actor or what she brought to the franchise. We're showing how evil the entity is into manipulating her. But then you've got the next step, which is, do we give Heather a third act where she tries to put the entity back behind the gate, so to speak?
Yeah, that part I don't know. That part I don't know. But I mean, but the question isn't like either in the real world. If Robert Englund, for whatever reason, he can't do the role anymore, do you just stop making? Does Freddy Krueger just stop existing in film?
Yeah.
Do you just stop? I mean, and just talking on a practical level, it's like, well, in order to keep the character pure, either you never make another Nightmare on Elm Street movie with Freddy Krueger, or you recast. Like, how does this character?
Well, and Dracula has always been recast, going with that kind of a mentality.
Yeah. Sure, but
Jackie Earle Haley thought he was going to be the Christopher Lee of the Hammer films of Dracula.
Right? Yeah,
didn't work out that way.
Yeah, but Bela Lugosi, the role of Dracula is larger than the actor, whereas Freddy Krueger, it's really hard, as we know, to get past the actor. That's again. That's one. Well, again, but
and that's the thing, and that's I think that in there, right there, there is your answer, is that yes, the evil can live on, as somebody else will pick up that mantle, and because Freddy's only been around for 40 years, not even. So like that's the whole point. Is I'm sure for that first however many years until the next Dracula, because how many years was it? 20, almost 30 years, not quite 20 some years till Hammer redid Dracula. So I'm sure for that amount of years, a lot of people are like, yeah, Bela Lugosi is Dracula. And as soon as they announced they were making another Dracula, if they were aware of it, like, I ain't gonna go see another Dracula without him. Like, and they made a bunch of sequels without him because, he died in the first movie. But I was just using that as an example. But that's kind of the idea I was getting from, and that's maybe I think the answer to your thing is that yes, these can carry on as long as somebody else picks up that mantle. It may not be Jackie Earle Haley this time out, and that's how you can have a little fun with him in the movie. But like, it's just a matter of who is going to be next, and you can't change what Nightmare on Elm Street inherently is, and I think that's the goal you have to get to, is that you can do all this crazy stuff, but at the end of the day, Nightmare on Elm Street is Freddy Krueger versus Nancy Thompson in a little house on Elm Street. Like, that's kind of what it is. Kind of like how Halloween, no matter what they do with all these sequels, will always just be the shape chasing, Jamie Lee Curtis through that house. Like, that's what it will always be, no matter how hard you try to do something else with it. I think that's maybe what makes it so pure in of itself. But again, that's your choices. You guys are the storytellers.
What if oh my God. I don't know if this, maybe somebody already said this. What if she inadvertently has her own son be possessed by the evil and he becomes the new Freddy?
So bring back Miko as the guy to do it?
Yeah, he becomes Freddy Krueger. I mean, not that was part of the whole movie within a movie, but like within the reality of New Nightmare, like it's passed on to him or something, and he becomes the boss.
Like,
I don't know.
Like the irony being is that they bring Heather in as the executive producer, and they're like, well, Jackie Earle Haley didn't work out well. We need someone who can really do this, that has a connection to the franchise and can really do this. And it's like, hey, let's bring in Dylan and cast him as the new Freddy.
Or cast him as the hero, and then he becomes the villain by the end or something. Because I still think I still like the commentary on Hollywood and modern reimaginings of things, having the initial idea being that the villain is going to be a female.
Yeah, and I think that's what gets you to the ultimate goal is, can you really keep doing that, or is it just redundant and silly because you're still telling the same story, but all you're really doing is flip-flopping things, right? Like, and maybe that's your whole point of when you have that younger Nancy become the entity, right? Like, and maybe that's where you can play into some of this digital shit. Like, is that the fact that it doesn't need to be recast? I can always be the same character because of the digital age now. And like, that's kind of your whole...
I inspired George Lucas to come up with this thing. He thought of it in a dream.
God bless George Lucas. Yeah.
Oh, so maybe the ultimate goal is to be scanned into perpetuity or something, so that he's
In
always a
digital life
representative.
forever.
They James Earl Jones,
Yeah.
Robert Englund. He does his voice. They AI his voice. They scan his face.
Oh, so maybe Robert Englund is like, again, like I say, he's reluctant to do this again and everything else, but then somehow Nancy's the one to push him over the edge to get involved. And
Yeah.
Because she just so desperately wants to work with him again on this type of franchise because of all the fun and friendship that they had, and recapturing the old time, so to speak, as a person of age does. Yeah, that's a good
Well, and they do have a really good relationship. So that's the best thing you can play with, because those two do have a friendship. And they do look at this Nancy and Freddie thing like a Beauty and the Beast kind of situation. And that's what got New Nightmare to where it was in the first place. And that was the inspiration for Wes, is that their relationship, and then this whole idea that, what if, this, because he said it mainly came from the question of, is what we're doing affecting the people that are watching it?
Yeah.
Because he was constantly asked that. Like, every interview he was ever asked was like, don't you worry about what you make and how it affects people? Aren't you afraid you're going to create a Freddy Krueger? Or especially after Scream, when you actually had the kids claim that Scream gave him the idea. That was really kind of like where I'm sure it hit home for him, even though he kind of predated Scream with New Nightmare. And that's the thing. To me, everything that everybody loved about Scream, Wes already did New Nightmare. They just ignored it. Right? Like, that's the problem. But anyway, that's waxing intellectual here. But like, that's the other thing you have to ask the audience too, is how is this affecting people around them, as far as like, is it the movie that makes people evil, or is it the evil itself that's Freddy? And that's the answer. Remember, it's contained within the movie, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to play with that a little bit. Is that the trick is even though he's trying to trick Nancy, in the end, Nancy figures out a way around it, like you said, to where it's like, yeah, but you're still trapped in the movie. You can't get out as long as we make a movie, kind of thing. And in digital, like you said, you're forever, so like, even, you can play with that a little bit, is what I'm getting at, is you have the building blocks here. So I'm going to shut up now for about 10 minutes.
Okay. So we have the boardroom meeting. We have the discussion of what we're going to do. One question I had was, I was trying to think of, like, where is the character of Heather Langenkamp after the events of New Nightmare? Do we just sort of like hand wave the sort of meta ending and everything from the film, and just sort of say she's just as normal now as she was before, and everything else is just kind of still a hazy kind of dream and just a tragic thing with her husband and everything, or she like Sarah Connor, and she's been in an asylum for the last 20 years or something.
In reality, she's just kept working, and she's finally embraced a bit more of her horror past in that respect.
Well, here's the other part too, because you can take her history and working and roll it into this type of remake, because Nancy could Heather could be a little apprehensive at first, because people may not know, she actually appeared in Star Trek Into Darkness, so she knows that this thing can always go south.
Yeah.
And so
that's because her husband did makeup.
Yeah, because her husband's in special effects and
well, maybe she sees it as a win 22 in a way, because if they make this movie, it rewrites Freddy Krueger out of the picture. But even if whether it succeeds or it fails, if it fails, it goes off into obscurity and actually, sort of has closes the door to the entity. And if it succeeds, then he's completely overwritten. So it's kind of like a no-lose situation from the rules that she was given from Wes in the first movie.
And then she finds out that she was the pawn in this latest encounter.
Right. That's going to be
clever.
Yeah. Okay. So
because you also need to introduce a new writer. Like, that's the thing, is Wes. The thing is you have Wes in the background writing what's going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And he has no control over it. He just has to write.
Ooh. What if Robert Englund's the writer? They try to get him to be on as the writer.
He did try to write a few Nightmare movies before. I mean, it's not out of his character.
Yeah, again, and if you did something like that, if not Robert Englund,
because we're forgetting the writer here. The writer is a big part of this. The writer is kind of that's where Freddy works through.
What if Dylan's grown up to be a screenwriter?
Ooh,
there you go.
So if Dylan grew up to be a screenwriter because of his, I mean, it fueled in part by his experiences in the first film, and because of his father's history in the movie industry. Murder, but also the fact that he's an effects guy. So he still has, and his mother still has Hollywood connections, and he has a very active imagination, as we saw in the first movie. Yep. So maybe he's a screenwriter, and they decide to tap him to write the film, and that's how you bring Heather into the story.
Yeah.
And then he becomes sort of like the for lack of a better word, the scribe of the evil villain.
And you can almost play off the beginning of the first movie where, because remember, her husband lies to her and she dreams about it, but he lies to her and doesn't tell her that he's working on the new Nightmare film, remember?
Right, yeah.
Basically, she dreams about Freddy's return and finds out her son is the one that's writing the screenplay.
Yep.
And then her agent and manager are like, yeah, but we're going to bring you back because your son.
And that's the catch, is they know you can't say no to your own son.
Yeah.
Right.
And Robert Englund would be like, yeah, fine. I'll scan myself and sell my likeness rights to the company because Dylan is like my godson, so to speak. I've known him.
And when Heather goes to her son and says, Dylan, you know what happened the last time, and he's like, but Mom, see, I'm in the position now to control.
I'm in control.
I say what happens.
He has that false sense.
Yeah, that false sense that I can be the demon slayer, and in this story, we're going to get rid of him for good. And that's the temptation, right? It's like, I'm going to be the good guy. Yeah.
There you go. Perfect. Yeah. Love it. Loving it so far.
Okay. All right. Let's see. So
and there's your answer. So this is a Hollywood version of Heather Langenkamp. Let's be real. Obviously, because her real husband didn't die, all that business. So we're doing that. Okay.
Yeah. This is the sub-universe of what was created in New Nightmare. It's a continuation from literally that film. It's not another meta thing where we're just it is exactly those characters representative of those
and Miko's character wants to do the film as both an homage to Wes and also to, like you said, close off the entity. He thinks he has a way to do it, and this is how.
Because we can't deny what happened to those
that want to restart this as an ongoing thing, right? And he's got to, because that happens.
They want to do like a reimagining. He's like, no, this has to be a continuation. I have to put the cork in the bottle, or I have to like cap this off, right?
Well, that's the thing is they want a trilogy, so he thinks the key is creating a new villain, when that's really just gonna. That's how like you said, Freddy's using Nancy as the.
He does it as a guise of passing the torch. His technique of passing the torch is to put a cap on Freddy and then start this new villain from scratch. But that's exactly what the entity wants. Yeah.
But I just thought, what if Dylan's sort of sub intent is to try to throw in as much as possible in the script to make the film fail, to finally kill off the franchise, but then he's manipulated into making something better that serves the bad guys he goes. That's why the whole female entity, the female antagonist comes up and everything. Maybe he's the source of all that at first, but then he's turned around, or is that the studio, you think?
No, I think I think you actually can play into the Hollywood part of the writer versus the director.
Yeah, or the
writer throws in all the stuff that should make this thing fail to achieve the outcome that Dylan and Heather would want, but the director is so on board with it, but the way he executes it, it just ends up making it a really good movie. Like the dailies are coming back and everybody's actually really liking it, and the stuff that he's hoping doesn't work actually ends up working, and he doesn't understand why.
Well, we also have to remember that Wes had no control, right? Like he accepted his role. He's like, I have to do this. I sleep, I have the dreams, I wake up, I write it down, and then my only hope is that you'll decide to play Nancy one last time.
Right,
because that's his only. Because he kind of gets to this point where he's like, "That's our only hope here is that you can stop him. I can't stop him. Robert can't stop him. Nobody else can stop him. Right? Mm-hmm. You're the only one, and you're the key. And that's what, like you said before, is that Nancy is that key. So, like, that's the other thing is maybe somehow Freddy wants to turn Nancy or destroy Nancy in some way, and like you said, he can do that by becoming Nancy, right?
Because killing her is obviously killing her. I think the ultimate conquest for any particular evil is not so much just destroying your enemy, but corrupting your enemy to your side, whether they know it or not. That's a far more satisfying conquest than just like killing somebody.
And it has to be Nancy, because that kind of goes along with our whole point of the characters can live on. The actor doesn't matter, right? Like that's the whole point.
Yeah, and Wes set the rule in the movies, like Nancy is the gatekeeper. Sorry, Heather is the gatekeeper, and or Nancy, depending on how you look at it. Heather, so she has to be the vital piece in overcoming this whole thing. Dylan is trying to both save the world and save his mother, because if he can write a story where his mother's no longer in danger in some way, or make her no longer part of the narrative, then this is his opportunity to do that and maybe give her some peace. Now, whether or not Dylan in adult age actually either believes in what happened to him, or if he thinks he's just doing this as a psychological tool to help his mother in a therapeutic way, that might be something else to talk about. But yeah, that it's the son saving the mother, that's his intent. And she, she's wary of the whole thing of him being involved, but she also, I don't think she can deny the logic of it. So some way she's got to be coming around to the idea at some point.
Well, yeah, because she thinks that he's, of course she's leery, but you'll have this whole thing where he'll explain to her, Mom, I can finally do something about it. Like maybe you can even have it that he's been, bothering their nightmares for years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, you have this idea that they try to remake. You bring up the fact that there hasn't been a Nightmare on Elm Street movie for over 10 years, but it doesn't fucking matter because Freddy is still everywhere, right? Like that was my whole point. Like I've been playing him in Dead by Daylight for the last few days. Like that's the thing, is he's everywhere. It doesn't matter that he's necessarily, and that's kind of the whole thing, is that Freddy, kind of like, maybe that's another thing you can play with, is that media has gone way beyond movies and television now, right? Like especially since New Nightmare. And this idea that Freddy can penetrate even farther than he ever could before, right? Like that's the thing. And maybe he's trying to find a new way to do that, and through that new entity or whatever. But maybe that's maybe the key to getting rid of him, is he doesn't realize in this new entity that it has a built-in weakness that the other one didn't, right? Like in that new form, something to that effect. Because clearly he was bound by the rules that the original Freddy had been bound by, right? And he was contained in the films. As long as the films were being made, the entity was being contained. But the whole thing was he needed one more movie to get out, and that's how you got to kind of play out this thing, is what is his ultimate goal? Well, he wants to get out, right? Or does he want to continue? Which one is it? So you got to figure that part out too.
Well, I guess at this point his goal is to retain his position in the zeitgeist. And
because Wes said that he was fine just being that for years, but now he wants out, right? Like that was the whole thing. Yeah,
right. He wants to get into the real world. Well, he had that shot, and it went sideways on him, and now again, like the reboot failed, but actually, you know what the reboot did on the reverse side of things? It just proved the power of the original iteration of the character and actually fed him. So he probably liked the reboot. The entity probably liked the reboot because.
Well, and that's what I was saying. The remake didn't really do anything to destroy Freddy's legacy. It just
right. But okay, so my head wrapped around this. So the studio really wants to make. They really want to continue the franchise because it's again, like you say, Freddy is still out there and the whole idea. But the modern audience voice within the boardroom or whatever wants to change things up because obviously Robert Englund can't continue doing the role, and the fans obviously won't accept anybody else doing the role because Jackie Earle Haley. So we have to find a way to pass the torch to a new character, not just a new Freddy Krueger. It has to be a new character because the fans won't accept. At least that's the thinking within the narrative of the story.
Exactly. Going along with Halloween Ends. Perfect. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. So then they start thinking about this, and somewhere in there's an interview with Heather and Robert where they're talking about this whole thing, and they're like thinking about rebooting the franchise, and Robert's like, yeah, well, I kind of had my last hurrah, and Heather's like, oh, it'd be so great to work with Robert again, and then Heather's talking to Dylan like, oh yes, and then Dylan's like, oh, I got a new project. Oh, what is it? I don't want to bother you about it, Mom. And she's like, what do you mean bothering me about it? It's like, well, it's going to dig up some old stuff, but I think it's a good thing. And she's like, what? They've tapped me to write the sequel. And Mom's like, what? No, you have to stay away from this. And he says, no, Mom, look. And you can kind of play with the fact of whether or not Dylan actually remembers what happened as real, or is just a dream or part of their family lore. But either way, he thinks that he's going to be doing something beneficial for Mom by being part of this, guiding it, and also being the one to write the ending.
Well, that's where I said you could have had the fact that Freddy has not really gone away. He's still haunting Heather and him, but nobody else. That's the thing.
Sure.
Is it's contained to those two right now, and that's just
it. Even imply that Freddy got Wes.
Yeah, that too. Is like, you imply that Wes died. He finally got to Wes, and this somebody else needs to finish the story. And
so, a matter of time until he gets to Heather, and he's like, "Listen, ever since Wes died, you know."
So he sales pitches to Mom like, "This is a good thing. I'm going to write this. I'm going to finally, lock the entity in a cage it can't get out of." And we don't know what's going to go on the script yet. We don't know what's in his head for all this, but he thinks he has a way to make sure that Freddy never comes back again, or that thing is locked away or something. Maybe that can be part of the twist at the end. I don't know. Maybe he intended to have his mother, something happened, but it went wrong. I don't know. But anyway, so the entity's motivation, he gets this because he's inside their subconscious. He knows what's going on. He can't directly affect it right now, maybe because he's spread too thin, or because he's so much he's more of a joke now than a threat because of video games and everything else.
And he's also a hero to a lot of people too. So
that's
exactly. Yeah, he's no longer a figure of fear as much as he's a figure of almost like sentiment, nostalgia, reverence, rather than.
Well, maybe there's your twist at the end when he's like, "That's just it, Nancy. You're really the villain." You know, they don't want you to kill me, like that kind of a thing,
There you go. So, but Freddy he wants to stop this. He still knows that there's a threat to him, so he wants to shut this down in some way. So how and through whom does he manifest is the next question, because then he has to actually take action in the real world in some way to try to derail this. So does he make a pawn of Robert Englund and sort of like tempt him with the notion of his past glory or something?
I mean, if he does and he gets him to, because again, I'm thinking that, in order for Nancy to suspect that Freddy will live on forever, it would be through the digital realm. So if Robert Englund's like, "Listen, I'm 75, I want to make sure I have a nice nest egg for my family and my estate. I'm going to sign over my voice rights and my facial rights for the Freddy Krueger character." And Nancy's like, "Well, that will make him live forever."
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's kind of where they have their argument. But then the son's like, "Don't worry, he'll maybe live in the digital realm he'll be in a flash drive on a desk somewhere. He'll never be coming back again because
the power is the story. The power is the story. It's encapsulated. Yeah, this is how we trap him. Yeah,
we use the very thing that is allowing him to maintain the zeitgeist as his prison. Like that would be the angle that her son would do, and allows him to go for it. And I think once they start getting into the actual production of things, that's where you start killing people off. Like you start killing off this makeup artist and special effects teams, and they have to be replaced. And then the camera guy, who's making sure that he's capturing the director's vision, is done. And you can have Nancy and Dylan each just barely surviving the dreams by the skin of their teeth, because Freddy's not trying to kill them, he's just trying to torment them and gain more power, but he's killing all the people around them with I guess the leaving a trail saying like, "You two are going to be my swan song," so to speak. It's like, not only do I get you, but I get your son too. And who do you want? Who's going to watch who die first? Like playing into those aspects. Can be a lot of fun. But yeah, I would say you'd go from the last person that would have to be removed before the movie gets shut down, if that is what Freddy wants, would be the executive producer in charge of production. So like one of the guys at the top, or the head of the studio, so that the other guy who comes in to replace them, as they tend to do, cancels all the projects in development that look like they're not going to go anywhere. So you have to have that senior vice president's like, "I don't want to do a Freddy remake. It's so stupid. I want to do something new and fresh." And the studio has like, no, we're going to do this. It's an easy, fish in a barrel, tons of money, easy. Like, yeah, the last one sucked.
You could really have some
Nancy. We're bringing back Robert.
You could really have some fun with that. The fact that Mike DeLuca is now the head of
Wonder
Well, I was about to say,
he's like,
you could have like,
"You guys want to do a Freddy
support.
movie? Oh, that's not a good. I shouldn't go there."
You could have you could play into the whole like studio battles lately.
Inside.
the whole James Gunn stuff where it's like there's a news report where it's like, New Line, whatever studio owns it now, like New Line Cinemas really needs a hit, or else this other guy's going to come in and take over, and he's known for doing this, that, and the other, and so like there's this pressure on, there's this ticking clock of the production, like this has to be done, we have to do it quickly, we can't, we have to make sure that this hits, and so
I think the motivation is pretty simple when you've got Halloween 2018 hitting big, Scream coming out and doing okay, like you really, and then you just bring in the fact that Force Awakens and Top Gun Maverick were huge hits. What can we do with that? Like you got that already, the setup, and having Miko's character be a writer now, that works just brilliantly, because like you said, that they're going to want to do as much legacy as they can, right? But at the same time, that's the whole trick, is they don't really want a legacy, because that was the whole bait and switch of the Force Awakens, and kind of with Halloween Ends and so on, and Scream even to a big point, because I don't know if you've seen the 2022 Scream, like, but that thing it just shits all over the franchise and the fans.
But that's the angle that I guess Dylan would be taking in order to stop Freddy, is like, we gotta kill this franchise.
Yeah, he wants
this
that
is the
to
way
happen.
we do it.
And maybe that's the whole thing, is that Freddy is pissed because he's just been meandering and like nowhere. He's like, yeah, sure, it's great to be in a video game, but that's not a movie.
I just thought of something. I just thought like in this case, the franchise killer, the J.J. Abrams, is the hero of the piece.
That method is the hero of the movie.
Force Awakens is the biggest film of all time.
Yeah.
Halloween 2018 is the highest grossing horror film of all time.
Like, and this is the title, The Nightmare Awakens on Elm
The Nightmare Awakens.
I love it.
Yeah. And so he convinces his mom that he's got a plan to make this whole thing go away. The entity does not like this. He knows he needs Heather. If he knows that I guess I should say he already knows that if he goes toe to toe with these two, Heather and her son, he's going to lose, because he lost to Heather and an 8-year-old once. So going against them is probably not the best strategy. So he knows he's got to go around them and then through them to make this work. And that's where the whole, like, rather than destroy, you corrupt kind of thing. Maybe it ends up being Dylan's own ego in the process of writing the script or being involved in it that ends up corrupting him, and that baits Heather into the whole thing. Like, he has all the good intentions, of course, but then he starts like going down the path kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is, he gets obsessed with it, probably, because that's the thing is, you, like I said, you started out. Maybe that's how you even kick it out. Let's not start with a boardroom meeting, but you start with a flashback nightmare with him and Rex, because we never got to see Rex either. Remember?
Oh, Rex. That's right. No, I haven't a Rex.
And you actually get to see the death of Rex, and you see the situation where Miko is all alone now. Dylan is all alone now. And he's like, what can you kind of have this thing where Freddy just keeps fucking haunting him. And like you guys said, he can't kill anybody. He can't do anything, but he's still there, just looming over Dylan, just constantly antagonize him. He can hurt Rex, and he can do things like that to him. And you like maybe have it be like like a teenage flashback or something like that, or roughly, where you see that this is something that he's been dealing with for a while. And like you said, that's his motivation, and his hubris is that he thinks he can finally do something about this, when really all he's doing is helping Freddy in the end. Yeah. And his mom has to help. And that's what brings Heather full circle too, is that that brings her into that she's the only one who can really stop it all at the end, because she's the key, because that's who he wants. Right. So there you go. Mm-hmm. And he's in hubris thinking, oh, I can control this. I can be like Wes now. He didn't know what he was doing. We know what we're doing now, kind of thing. All that hubris involved.
But I know how to circumvent them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, and also the idea that we beat him, Mom. We beat him once, and now I'm in a position to really end it forever, kind of thing. It's like that kind of sense of achievement that Wes never had. Wes was just the guy with the ideas, and he wrote down the script and everything. But we actually lived it, and we know what we can do now.
And the best part is in the dream now, Rex can actually be like the T-Rex in Jurassic Park. Or he could be a nunchucking dinosaur. Just throwing that out there.
Actually, would be funny is if we find out some way near the end that the person who offered Dylan the job of the script writing was Freddy, or was the entity or something in the first place. Like the devil handed him his contract or whatever. Here's your deal.
Or is the entity that gave Freddy the power to begin with, even. The devil himself, like you said,
Okay, so
And it's a bad robot production.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the end of the day, that's all it is.
And here's the thing: we don't need there weren't that many kills in New Nightmare. There was a couple off screen. There was the husband. There was the babysitter. There wasn't actually that many kills. So we can conceivably still do this without having it be a slaughter fest, as long as it's character focused a lot.
And
To
the
a
kills
point.
have an intimate aspect to it to really get the creepiness across. Yeah.
Yeah, and making it creepier and not comedy. Even though there's a lot of obviously of Hollywood satire and things going on, you have to make sure it's played straight, and that the horror is actually horror and not
Like
cartoonish.
an executive is
Except for
snorting
one
coke
line.
with a $100 bill with a $100
Oh.
bill, but the $100 bill turns into Freddy, and then
Right?
goes
Yeah,
to his
exactly.
nose.
Okay,
Well,
what's
you
the-
got to
what's
have
the
one
line?
crack in there. You got to have one when, at least either when the director or an actor gets killed, he's got to say, "Well, I had to cut him out."
Oh.
You have to. You have
Yeah,
to.
yeah.
No,
Oh no,
I'm just
you
kidding.
gotta have the one
He'll be on
liners.
the cutting
Just
room floor forever.
no.
No, that's going too far. I'm
Okay,
kidding.
so Heather gets reluctantly taken on board with the idea. She's convinced. You know, she loves her son. They've been through it together. He assures her this is the way, Mandalorian, etc. And so
It's the way.
this is we're still in pre-production. We're not actually in like sets and everything yet. And I'm assuming the time frame of this film is not going to be like months and years or something.
No, the beauty of
yeah,
Hollywood movies is you can act like it all happens a lot faster than it really
That's
does.
true. Okay,
And if
so
you want to put a ticking clock on it, be like, well, we got to have it out for Halloween, and it's like June or something like that,
yeah.
or January or something.
Movie in 8 weeks. What are we,
Hey,
Roger Corman?
Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 was made in 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, no kidding, and it shows. Let's see.
Yeah, he kills one of the actors like, "This is your big break, buddy." You know, snaps him in half.
It's your big break, Jennifer.
Okay, but again, so the entity's trying to
He already
oppose
did
this.
that one.
Killing the executive trying to do it, that's not going to stop the film, right?
No, the only thing
And
that
of course,
stops the film is
if
the
the entity's
studio.
arranging this from the beginning, whatever he does to try to amp up the volume ultimately has to serve his purposes, because he wants this to keep going in some way, shape, or form. But he has to also, like, somehow whoever dies and how they die has to change how Dylan's writing the story. Like, it has
So
to,
then it has to be
yeah.
somebody probably close to Dylan, perhaps. Well, that's where I say we have Rex right away, right? Like that can be a first kill, and that's something that kind of sends Dylan down this road in the first place.
Yeah, so
Like
Dylan's
even
dreams, yeah.
maybe even Rex survived until he was an adult. Like this is just it now, just happening kind of thing. You could have
Well,
that.
in my mind, I'm thinking that Rex is his, like, in his own dreams, Rex is still the guardian. Rex is still
Yeah.
like his guard dog. But
That's my point,
I
yeah.
think, yeah, exactly. But I would almost say that Rex should still be a doll and not a CGI thing. It's just a totem more than anything else.
Well, you could do that.
I don't know if you want to animate it and turn it into like Jurassic Park. I don't know if that's.
I was mostly kidding with that, but like at the same time, I mean, they never showed it in the other one just because it was impossible. But
Yeah,
the way
sure.
they insinuated it is in the dreams. Rex is real, like he's there.
That's true.
Like I would picture him like, just like you said, like a guard dog, basically. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's a way you could make him look both like the Rex toy does, but also ferocious enough that Freddy. Well, I mean, maybe that's part of it too. Is that Freddy doesn't like him because he's cute.
Yeah, because the
Or
ferocious
maybe-
nature
ooh.
would be easy, but if the cuter he is, the more repulsed Freddy is. That works into the
Well,
Freddy cycles.
Okay, what about this? Like, okay, so Rex is part of Dylan's dreams. Freddy kills Rex in the dream, right? And then Dylan, because he's had this this best friend even throughout his childhood. He then, for some reason, then somehow that triggers him to change the script. Like he writes Rex into the script somehow, in order to make up for that.
Oh,
loss.
you want somebody that's written into the script is what you're trying to get to.
Well, no. The trick here is to take the good intentions of Dylan and slowly be manipulated around into changing, like violating his creative vision in sort of like the meta sense through what the entity is doing to make Dylan change things to serve him ultimately by the end. Maybe the first little change is that, oh, I can't let like Rex is dead in my head. I know he's gone. Like I see the toy, but like I know Rex is gone because just like this whole thing, Dylan's manifested Rex as almost its own internal entity. Mm-hmm. So then in order to bring Rex back, and he knows the power of the script, he knows the power of storytelling.
Gotcha.
If he brings Rex into his script somehow, and that's like it's a small thing, but it's a key off of into him becoming more obsessed with fixing everything, and that ends up corrupting the.
Well, I mean, I think that as long as you have this idea that Freddy's been bothering him all these years, that's enough motivation, right? Like he's like, because I think that's the hubris, is that he thinks he can contain Freddy by changing him or whatever, or creating a new entity, when that's the hubris of him, is he doesn't realize all he's doing is making Freddy stronger by giving him a new form, kind of thing, by doing it this way or something like that. Like that's the whole.
We're on the chat crime. We need the worst qualified director for this film. Who can we get? Cut to director answering phone call. Paul Feig. I appreciate the offer, but after Ghostbusters, I'm not doing this again. Yeah.
I think the funniest thing is Rob Zombie wouldn't do it, but like a script is right. You have to get somebody who's clearly a Rob Zombie stand-in.
Sure. Yeah. It's like
just to be funny.
Yeah. Fred Phantasm, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Maybe not Fred. That's too many Freddies. But
that's too many Freds. But I think I like that though. That's kind of fun.
How about Phil
Frankie
Phantasm?
Or Frankie Phil.
Yeah, Phil Phantasm instead of Phil Spector. There you go.
Yeah, yeah, that's clever.
Okay, well, just as a reality check, we're coming up nearly on 2 hours.
Yeah, sorry about
that. No,
it's my fault.
Tom, if there's one thing you need to stop doing, I've only just kind of in real life met you here for talking to you, but you need to stop apologizing when that is exactly what I hoped you would be here to help us do. Having you here is exactly the fun part of it, is to have the expert.
Well, I meant we wouldn't have got to this point probably, but yes.
No, I didn't imagine we were going to hammer out a whole script in one go.
I think you pretty much got most of the skeletal structure here, though.
Yeah.
Now you just need the rest of the characters to fill in, and this is where it necessarily doesn't have to be. That's why I was asking, because maybe it doesn't necessarily have to be Rex, because like you said, later on maybe he has a girlfriend or something like that Freddy gets, and then he thinks he can manipulate.
And he's got a wife and kid now himself or something, and they become under threat. Yeah.
But regardless, like I said, it's really simple. If you have him just being haunted by Freddy, and then the fact that he thinks if I change Freddy, if I pass on the torch, that can change things, when it's really not the case. And he finally, and again, I think the final realization should be that Freddy has to stay in the movies. As long as we keep him in the movies and in this story form, he can't hurt nobody. I think that's kind of going to be the bottom line, and also feeds into, yes, you can just keep retelling the same. You can keep Freddy alive forever as long as, the story stays alive, kind of thing.
How do you keep Freddy as a permanent part of the story, but not? That puts a whole bunch of question mark. Like what's his strategy? What is Dylan's strategy to trap the entity in the story forever, where he can't? That
is destroy him in the story forever. Like he thinks that destroying him in the story is going to kill him or something like that, when it's really just setting him free. And when he passes that torch on, and whatever that new version of Freddy he comes up with, like you said, it's end up being Heather. But
here's the other part too. It's not so much destroying him in the story, because that's what they've been trying to do all this time. It's destroying the story. That's what
exactly. That's what I'm saying, is passing the torch. That's the thing. Yeah.
He destroys the story. That's what Freddy wants, because that allows him to break free, because the story is technically his prison.
And that's the key to this, and that's what Freddy's trying to do, right? And then that's where these guys got to come to the realization that, no, we got to keep Freddy going in the stories. We can't, otherwise he's going to get out.
Otherwise, the story is in fact the prison. Without the story, he can break through and be free. And they think, no, if we destroy the story, he is part of the story, so he will vanish as well. And that's not the actual case. That's
Dylan's hubris. Exactly. They're right there. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so the whole movie's about Dylan now.
Well, Dylan is just
not so much.
I know. I just
But he's got to take that Wes Craven role, right? Like, because you don't have that now, and that is an important part, and he knows the power of that. Or maybe like I said, he's throughout the years, he's understood that this is how it worked before. And like I said, he's constantly being bothered by Freddie. And you can have it to where Nancy might be too, but she doesn't, or Heather is too, but she doesn't tell Dylan, right? Like, and that's when she finally tells him, is when he's like, I'm writing this new movie. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to finally destroy him forever.
Oh, so she's been protecting him all these years by not bringing it up, but it's been bugging her. And he's like, maybe they've both been lying to each other, like, oh, it's no big deal, but they've both been tormented this whole time until finally this thing comes about, and they're like, oh yeah, by the way, it's never gone away. Like, what? Why didn't you tell me the truth? Well, I didn't want to hurt you. That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
You're living in life. You're getting married. You have your kids. Why would I ever want to burden you with that?
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, I thought you were young enough that you had forgotten, kind of a thing.
Right. Yeah.
And Wes had made the movie, so I thought that had put a button on it, but he kept haunting me. I didn't know it was happening to you, kind of thing. And that's where her reluctance comes in, right? Like, she's not sure about this. Something doesn't feel right, but like, she also wants to protect her son, and she believes that he thinks he believes, or whatever, kind of thing. And through that brings her in. But no, it's still kind of their story, I would say, not so much Dylan's, because once you bring her into the picture, I just meant the prominence. Like I was just thinking that 2 hours ago, I'm sure Dylan Nico Hughes would be happy with that, though. Oh no, yeah, no, but all I meant by Dylan, if he's listening,
all I meant by Dylan in the story is that 2 hours ago, that Dylan wasn't even a part of my initial idea, and that we've come around to where it makes perfect sense. And I just love the fact that that's the thing about this.
And that's the thing, is you got to build. I guess I was looking at it like, 'cause you said, like, at first my brain was like, okay, we're in the real world. I had to retake myself back into, okay, we're going to go into this idea that this is 20 years into the future of New Nightmare, not the real world.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one thing that's going to be a little off,
because it will be the 20 by the time if we were actually writing this movie right now, by the time we get this movie out, it would be the 20th anniversary of that movie,
and the 40th of A Nightmare, right?
Of the original. Yes.
Yeah.
Let's see. One thing here. Okay, chat has stopped moving for me, and in the past, that's been a red flag that something might be wrong with you. If you guys are still hearing us in the chat, can you put something in the chat to say hello?
The last thing I had was Thomas Bartholdi. Chat is alive. Yeah. Okay, here we go. Yeah.
Okay, good. Just making sure. I get a little paranoid about broadcasting now.
I think they're just listening to us, because Thomas is like, I love this side. See, now you're getting the fan. That's where I'm getting it. Like, because now I'm on board with your idea here so far.
Okay, so just as a level check, do we want to keep going? Do we want to make this a part 2 at some point? And then
I'm fine, but it's up to you in script. So I have nothing else going on right now until later tonight.
Well, we can go for another 10 minutes, but I think with what we have right now, this is a good way to kind of do a pause. Like, we'll wrap it up over the next 10 minutes, and then we can come back to it a little bit later, having digested those story elements, those character points, and then now you can actually hone it into, okay, we have to figure out. I think that we should spend the next 10 minutes exactly what is the ending. Is it a dour ending, or where Nancy, where Heather is now the victim, or is kind of like Norman Bates in the psych ward saying, I'm here now, and now her Nancy avatar is the thing, or do we beat Freddie by way of having Heather reseal the gate and put Nancy behind there, and it's now Nancy and Freddie are kind of not necessarily one entity, or they're broken up, or it's back to Freddie again, or
my first reflex is that somehow the entity, we'll just call it Freddie. Freddie puts Dylan under threat in order to make Heather make a choice. That either it's Dylan's going to be. Either Dylan's going to be me, or you will, or something like that. I don't know. Like, there's got to be a choice, because I don't think we kill off Freddie in this movie. I think at least the notion that it's going to carry forward has to still be there. That's my first thought.
I think, and I don't know how we get to this point exactly, but I think the resolution should be that Nancy has to embrace this idea of always knowing that like, how do I put this? They want to foster the idea that Freddie and Nancy have to live on in the stories. And I like that idea that script said, like, they have to decide that not only does Freddie have to stay behind and get gated up, so does Nancy, the young Nancy.
Yeah.
Because in that then, and then on the other side of that, you show that Heather Langenkamp is completely embracing her past with this whole thing. Like, that's kind of the goal of this, is like, and she'll, you even if it's just like the ending of it's just this interview with her going, and I loved that character, and I hope someday some young lady will be able to pick up, and play Nancy and do it justice and that kind of a thing. And she just like looks straight into the camera, and who knows, it could be you, or something like that. Just something like that to kind of leave it on this note that yes, Freddy is still there, Nancy's still there, Freddy's trapped in the story forever, he's not getting out. And that's kind of his whole, like, and maybe that's kind of your catch at the end, is that he has Dylan's real, not like his soul, but like his real mind or his real agency, like trapped in a cage itself, right? And that's what he uses to manipulate Heather with, is that, like, yeah, he's got Dylan,
or we're in Dylan's dream, and we're in Dylan's dream, and he's got Rex back, but then the last shot of the thing is Rex, like, I don't know,
got the Freddy
starts laughing like Freddy or something.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing, is maybe in the beginning you have it where he wakes up after the death of Rex, quotations, and Rex is just mutilated, right? Like he's laying on the shelf where he's had him there, and he's just completely mutilated. And this is adult Dylan now. And so he picks it up and he tries to put it back together, throughout the film. Like, that's his whole thing, is he's trying to put Rex back together throughout the film while he's writing this. And then you can have something like that at the end, is he thinks he got Rex back together, but it's really just Freddy fucking with him or something like that.
Yeah. And then I think the fact that the way that Heather realizes that she can win is, you can't destroy the story, because that's the only thing keeping him
exactly
there.
Exactly.
How about a reverse of, how, in the first film, Nancy grabs onto Freddy and pulls him into the real world from the dream. But what if we end with Nancy grabbing onto Freddy and pulling him back into the story?
That could work somehow, if you can find a way for him to, like, get past that threshold. That
okay.
And maybe that's how he does it, is he does it in the visage of young Nancy, and then when he gets to the real world, well, then he's Freddy again, and then you have the old Nancy coming through and pulling him back in, something like that, and that effect. Like, because I do like this idea of having a young and an older Nancy, because I think that makes her face the fact that
Well, yeah, because the young Nancy is the idealized version, not only of the hero of the story, but also of herself, her youth, her her promise, and everything else.
And that's what Freddy represents, is the death of all that, right? Like, that's kind of that plays into that too.
Yeah. Okay, that's a kind of ending.
And you could even have a moment where Freddy manipulates her. He's like, "Look at you.
Yeah,
I didn't have to kill you to kill you.
You're already dead inside.
You look at you're a pale shadow of what you used to be." And then that's when he turns around and he's her as young version or something like that. Something to that effect. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, we have an initiation. We have a kind of.
Well, we got to write a treatment now, huh?
Yeah.
That's the next
exactly.
step.
Yeah. Next step is to write up the treatment, send it off to Robert Englund, and get it all going.
Mike DeLuca.
Sure.
Might be able to find it. Might be able to find his email somewheres.
Well, hey, I think that's a good place to pause, if nothing else, guys. There may be a part 2 at some point in the future where we refine. But I think that's a very good start. I'm not quite sure what else to add other than, first and foremost, I want to thank Script Doctor and Tom Connors for humoring me and my silly idea.
No, this has been fun, and I'm sorry I am like just kind of jumped in on this whole thing. But I get it. I was the impetus for it all, so yes.
You know what? If there's one, like I say, we got to cure Tom of his apologia here at some point. There's nothing to apologize for. The last person to apologize here is Tom. Like I said before to Tom, I'm thrilled that I had any opportunity to have either of you on as a guest on my channel. I still, after 6 years, I still feel like small fry, and I still kind of am. But I've been a fan of your guys' for a long time. I've watched Midnight's Edge since the Josh Trank documentaries on Fan4stick. Script Doctor, I always like, let's listen to you break stories down and everything. So thank you guys so much for joining me for this special Halloween
been fun, edition.
Man. Hopefully we'll do this again as a pickup sometime in the near future, after we have some time to digest and think about this. Hopefully not next Halloween, but sooner. Yeah. Before we split, though, Script Doctor, do you have anything you'd like to promote, shill? You got any projects coming up you'd like people to know about?
Not so much. I mean, I might pick up the Diablo stuff this Tuesday morning, but tonight I am going to be on Nina Infinity's channel talking about House of the Dragon. Because that just wrapped up last week or a week before, something of that nature. I can't remember, but yeah, we're going to talk about that. And yeah, if my morning isn't too bogged down with stuff for tomorrow, I'll be happy to pop in over at Midnight's Edge in the morning and shoot the breeze with those guys. So
yeah, I'm sure we'll have some things to talk about.
Yeah, and everybody, Script Doctor's particulars are in the description. Follow him on Twitter. Go to subscribe to his YouTube channel, all that good stuff, so you can keep tabs on that. And Tom Connors, what do you got coming up that you'd like people to know about?
I usually bop all over the place. I think I'm going to be showing up on Doomcocks later on tonight. And of course, morning show tomorrow, so on. But yeah, just check me out on Midnight's Edge and After Dark, and yeah, that's the best places to find me.
Yep, and all of Tom's particulars as well are in the description, guys. Twitter and YouTube's and all that good stuff. Anyway, as for myself, if you'd really like to hear more from me about something other than Nightmare on Elm Street, you can find me here next Thursday, per usual, at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, for another edition of TED Excellence, where I'll take a look at another off-brand TED Talk for fun and enjoyment. I call it Funjoyment. Guys, again, thank you so much for joining me. Everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. Let us know what you thought about it in the comments, and please like the show on the way out if you would. And also, just a reminder, if there's a content creator out there that you like and you appreciate their stuff, let people know, because unlike YouTube, you guys are our best algorithm. Tweet out our stuff, and especially, at least in my case and on Twitter, if you do tweet out my stuff, please tag me in it so I know that you have, so I can thank you directly, because I appreciate that you have. Anyway, everybody, have a good rest of your Sunday. Have a good rest of your weekend. Have a safe and happy Halloween. I hope you are all safe and well. If you are not well, please get well soon, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye. And you two guys, hang out a second or three here so I can say goodbye to you officially.